All right, so I'll get started. So as we all know, AI is changing kind of our world, and there are some big changes in the publishing world too, for better or for worse. Oh, got a couple more people. Come on in. Come on in. Started. So yeah, so AI is having a big effect on the world of publishing. So for better or for worse, there's been a huge surge of AI generated literature available at online retailers like Amazon. The actual number of AI generated books is kind of hard to um, come by, but the influx has been so much that it's caused Amazon to implement a new policy that limits Kindle authors from self-publishing more than 3 books a day on its platform. So it's for human authors, it does provide opportunity since AI is good at generating structured grammatical and human sounding text. Supporters of AI generated literature say that it's going to create more content, better content, and new types of content. But it is also creating some major obstacles. Challenges include it's harder for readers to distinguish what's written by actual humans and what's written by AI. Authors are finding fake books online that are supposedly written by them, but were actually most likely created with AI. And a lot of people are already kind of unwilling to pay standard market prices for ebooks that are by an author that they are less well known. So when you're flooding the market with all of these ebooks, it means that less well-known authors are going to have to price their books cheaper to compete in that market. So, and another risk is that when we generate a vast amount of literature of low quality, which is kind of right now, it's more the low quality end of the spectrum, it becomes harder for the reader to separate informative literature from low quality materials. So, and if you guys have any questions, feel free, or comments, feel free to interject. We want this to be kind of lighthearted and like a good discussion. So things to keep in mind. Oh, do you have a question? No. So things to keep in mind is that most AI models can only create kind of a few thousand words of content at a time. So it's challenging to create longer narratives like chapters and novellas without specialized prompts. So that's kind of holding it back a little bit right now, but people are getting around it. Nonfiction works are still considered pretty untrustworthy because, again, it's grabbing information from all over the place. It's not being fact checked like it would if a human author or editor was working on that. And right now, things to keep in mind, kind of like bigger picture, the US Copyright Office currently does not consider AI generated works to be copyrightable. And various academic institutions consider the failure to attribute work to the AI system that generates it as a form of plagiarism. So ownership, copyright, and plagiarism are all significant risks for both authors and businesses. If this is something that you would like to kind of explore more, there is a new site called bookbud.ai, which recently launched what it claims is the first ever online hybrid of bookstore and library, which exclusively features books generated by artificial intelligence. So that is the place where you can go and see what's being produced.
When they publish one of these AI books, do they sign their real name or is it a pseudonym?
Both. It's really up to the person that's creating it. Tim, if you know more, feel free to jump in. But yeah, it's really up to the person creating it. So you can put whatever, just like an actual book, you can have a pseudonym, you can use your real name. So yeah. Yeah.
Is the way to look through what they're writing to figure out it's not real? I have a very distant cousin in Western Canada doing a lot of his art with AI, and I'm always critiquing, saying that doesn't look realistic because you need to do this or that. So, and he's always taking input, but can you see that in the written word?
Good question. I think there's quality is not always there unless somebody is really like going through AI generated text and really kind of fixing it. It's still clunky and not quite perfect, not exactly like a human would write it. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to tell. Any other questions?
I have one question. I'm just wondering how it happens. So would a potential author ask AI a series of questions like, write me a comedy story about a pterodactyl in Hollywood? Or, put prompts in,
Mhm.
and then it goes out to the AI engine and it starts to write?
Mhm.
So the
Exactly.
author must put parameters around it?
Yes, you absolutely need to prompt it. So if you've ever played around with like the Chat GTP or like another kind of like prompt system, yeah, you do have to like write me a comedy fiction story, 10,000 words. Character's first name is, but yeah, so you're like you're prompting the AI. It's not like coming up with this out of nowhere. But it's all, this human generated or it's AI generated, but the human is writing the prompts.
In 3,000 words a day, did you say it would only write?
Oh, I'm not sure. There's different kind of generators and they all have different kind of like parameter, like what they can do. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are these AI books, are they mostly Kindle and electronic books, or are they hard copy paper?
They're mostly ebooks. And I haven't seen any that are like actually like published, but yes, they are publishable, so if you want to like self-publish a book, then you can. Mhm. Yes.
How does Amazon know that it's the same author and limits that author to 3 books and you can use different names?
Right? I mean, I would assume that it's like so Amazon has like a self-publishing portal, which you need like your login information, your login credential, so your email, password. So it still like a human having to go in and like actually like press publish. So yeah.
It can be easily manipulated.
It can. I mean, I don't know what kind of safeguards Amazon has in place to prevent you from creating like multiple logins, but yes. Mhm.
It's basically a convenience factor.
So do you want to go to the next one? So we'll see the next slide, Tim, and we'll continue talking about just like
Hi, Tim, I wondered where you were. Yeah.
the voice on the screen. So, let me pull that up. So, yeah. So just like it's changing the world of ebooks, it's also changing the world of audiobooks. Artificial audiobook narration technology now allows authors to create human sounding audiobooks of their works in a cost-effective way that doesn't sound digital or robotic. So there are over 40,000 titles in Audible right now that are marked as having been created, narrated with AI. So some positives are audiobook sales are growing every year. So AI generated audiobooks can author or unlock additional revenue for authors. It's cost effective. AI generated voices are cheaper than hiring professionals. And especially useful for self-published authors who maybe don't have a lot of money. It's consistent. AI voices maintain the same tone, pronunciation, and pacing throughout the audiobook. They're totally customizable, so the author can choose from a variety of voices based on gender, age, language, and accent. Users can even upload their own voices and create a personalized AI voice. Hey, how are you? And it's scalable, so AI can quickly generate large amounts of narration. So negatives, this obviously is having a huge effect on human audiobook narrators who are losing income and are facing kind of an unprecedented change to their industry. Authors might appreciate this additional revenue stream, but audiobook listeners have complained online about the influx of new material, and they're finding it hard to kind of sort between what has a human narrator and what has an AI narrator. Even though they are supposed to be marked clearly. And listeners for now are saying that they prefer human narrators. So publishing executives, say that they're kind of treading lightly into the AI realm. They agree that using the technology for translated books makes sense, but they're less convinced that AI narrated audiobooks will be the future. So some things to keep in mind. Any book published in the US after 1963 remains copyrighted. Only the audio rights holder has the legal right to make an audiobook of those titles. So anything that's published in the US before 1928 is in the public domain. So technically you could create an audiobook of something that was written before 1928. But for currently copyrighted works, you need permission from the author if you want to make an audiobook of their work. Ultimately, the success of AI generated ebooks and audiobooks is down to the consumer and whether the consumer is willing to pay for it. So as a reader and listener, right now, you get to decide whether or not you want to support AI created works. So big thing to think about.
What's your professional opinion about this? Is it the beginning of greatness or is it the beginning of darkness and weirdness?
Oh, boy. I think like all AI is a great tool. I think it can be utilized in really wonderful ways. I am really leery of, I think there's something to be said about like human authors, human narrators. I don't want to lose that. So yeah, it's kind of pros and cons. So yeah, right now the library does not have any AI generated works in its collection, but who knows?
That's like the art that's out there that's been coming out on Facebook. It's fake.
Mhm.
You know, it's not fall foliage, it's purples and pinks and all
Yeah.
kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, but it will get better, like that's the scary thing is it's gonna keep getting better. Yeah.
Well, one of the problems with our system right now is that AI, automatic things, can work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. They don't need medical care.
Oh, so much more cost effective, right?
So
It's just a
much more.
person like putting in a couple prompts, the computer does it for you.
No retirement. So, I mean, Yuval Harari was saying that the future of work is to be automated because it's cheaper. It's not better. But as far as the people making the decisions or the owners of the equipment and the rights,
So yeah, so that's why I say like you guys, you, the readers, you, the listeners, get to decide whether or not this is, because that's what it's gonna boil down to. Will consumers pay for these AI generated works?
But it's
And that is
not
something to
new.
be seen. Mhm.
It's not new, it's just because we've already automated a lot of jobs out of
Yeah.
existence. So it's just another step on the way.
but as voters, not consumers.
Well, in this case, it's consumers, but yeah, and voters, but yeah.
Yeah.
So any other comments about audiobooks? All right, Tim, next slide. So good news. You may have noticed that the library now has access to the Consumer Reports online database. This is super cool. The database is now free to all PTL card holders. So we've had the magazines and the indexes here at the library, but now you can access the full online archive, which is really fabulous. This was sponsored by the Friends of the Peterborough Town Library. Totally free. So to access, if you're in the building, you can go to our website, the online resources page on our website, click the Consumer Reports link, and that will take you directly to the database. If you're at home, do the same thing, except that you'll be prompted to put in your card number, and then you again have full access. But very cool. There's like, I was helping a patron, kind of purchase a car. They have an awesome questionnaire where you can like say, I want an SUV, I want rear wheel drive, I want a manual, and it will like take all of that and it will, give you the best option. So that is a great new thing that we have here at the library.
Select the speed. Check.
All right, next slide, Tim. Okay, another big one.
Dictation. Check color correction. Password for
Okay, so.
Parents.
Gross. All right, so another big one. Tech companies are ditching touchscreens. Even Apple is bringing back the button. So if you're frustrated that everything has touchscreens these days, like think cars and stovetops, some tech companies are returning to tactile buttons. So rebuttonization is occurring in everything from e-readers to induction stoves these days. So you know how your car comes with a touch screen these days, and like washer dryer has like a little like sort of button that you kind of have to press. So like even when our devices have buttons these days, they're actually called capacitive buttons where you just have to like kind of hold it. It doesn't actually like click or do anything. It just shows you that it's like on or off because the light will turn off or it will make a sound. That's called a capacitive button. And so touchscreens and capacitive buttons have been really popular for a long time. They've become really cheap to produce. And for a while, they were seen as very luxurious. But that is starting to change. So yeah, capacitive buttons can be really frustrating. Like, did I actually press it? Why isn't it responding? And they're annoying, but they can also be prone to malfunction. For example, there is an induction cooktop that has touch-based controls that will become inoperable when the pot boils over. So, and like another big problem with touch-based interface, touch-based interfaces is that they aren't touch-based at all. You actually have to like look at the screen. So like when you're driving, you have to like look at the screen to like make sure that it's doing what you want. So almost every vehicle maker has moved key controls onto central touch screens. So you have to take your eyes off the road now to operate that, which raises the risk of distraction crashes. It's actually such a problem that the European New Car Assessment Program has declared that for a vehicle to be rated at the highest 5-star safety rating, it has to be equipped with buttons. Because the touchscreen
Starting what
is,
year does it say?
actually couldn't find that out. Or it wasn't in the article that I read, but I could probably find that. Mhm.
So then you'll spend more time looking for the right button as you
yeah.
crash into somebody.
Yeah, and like, did I actually press it? Whereas when it's a button, like, oh, I pressed it, it gives, I know it is on.
If it works.
If it works, yeah. So yeah, and then in addition to like kind of those malfunction errors, safety issues, they're also kind of seen as tacky these days. Touchscreens are not as luxurious as they once were. So now these days, physical buttons, well done, are seen as more luxurious than touchscreens because everybody has a touchscreen now, when you've got a nice, well-lit button. Yeah,
How about voice control?
voice control is still popular. Yeah.
So touch screen is obsolete now. The novelty's gone.
Yes, exactly. The novelty is gone. So some companies that are making the return to physical buttons, Apple in their latest iPhone 16 release, they created a new action button as well as a touch bar for the camera controls. And then on their earpod or their AirPods, they have like a force sensor now that like will respond when you squeeze the earpod stems or the AirPod stems. So again, you're getting more of that. Like you want like a response when you actually like press it. BMW is bringing back physical control for their mini cars with the goal of the driver not having to take their eyes off of the road. There's going to be a scroll wheel on the steering wheel and access to voice controls through a voice assistant.
So The iPhone 16?
Yeah, iPhone 16 has, not everything is buttons, but they're bringing back more of the buttons. So I wouldn't be surprised if more models continue adding more buttons back. Volkswagen is bringing back physical controls to features such as climate control, following customer complaints. And while Amazon is sticking with like their e-readers are sticking with totally like touch screen only. Other ebook readers like Kobo, Nook, and Books all have models that have a back page turn button. So it's changing. Yeah. Questions about that? No. Yes.
I can see the advantage in cars not having a screen, it's obvious. But on an iPad or a phone, I don't understand the
Yeah.
advantage of not having a screen, a touch screen.
I think that there will be a screen. It will never, like, if you think back to like the Blackberries that were all like buttons. There's a reason that Apple, iPhones became more popular than that, so it will never go away for certain things. It's just more about bringing buttons back to places where it should never have been a touch screen or a capacitive button. That's
So hybrid models maybe.
For an iPhone, it actually will be sort of a hybrid model. There'll be buttons,
Mhm.
but there'll still be a touch screen.
Exactly. Yeah, there's just gonna be buttons where there should be buttons and touchscreen where it should be touchscreen. Yeah. All right, next slide. All right, this one, more good news. The library launched a new online catalog. So if you've been on the online catalog on our website, you'll notice that it looks different these days. We launched it back in August. So you can now easily browse physical and online collections. So instead of just seeing the physical books that are here at the library, you can now browse audiobooks and ebooks that are available through Libby and Hoopla. And you can manage your account all in one place. So you can see what books you have checked out. You can see all of your Libby and Hoopla holds. You can very easily place holds. So it is pretty exciting. You can renew books. And it's just kind of a much better version of what we had before. Yes.
It's very confusing because when you go, it looks like you're waiting for it to be sent in from the state library. So it's not crystal clear. It is in our library and I'm borrowing it or I'm on the wait list for it.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah. Tim, can you click on that link for me? I just want to show you guys one thing real quick. Okay, so can I click on this? No. You click on the space bar, Tim, and just hit enter. The search bar, yeah. Open up. So if you go down to shelf location, which is on the menu over on the left-hand side, you can narrow down your search to just see what is actually in the building. So if you don't really know quite what the title is, if you search for adult fiction, that will show you all of the books that are actually in the library. Because it can be a little confusing. If
It was on that first screen when you have all the new books.
Oh,
across.
yeah.
It looks like they're coming from outside.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't look like they're here.
Yeah, no.
That's what's confusing.
And all the new books, like all of the things that are back on like the spotlights, we call them, those are all books that are actually here in the library.
It should be clear on there on the screen that that's what's going on.
I'll make a note of that. And then you can also, another way to check if the book is here, is when you look at
gmail.com.
the
Edit
title. The book will say that's on the shelf and then it will place a hold, or it will say it's available through like Libby or Hoopla. So that's another way to see where it actually is. Yeah.
Website Aspen Discovery,
Mhm.
and it's one word.
Yeah, all one word. You can get there through, just go to the Peterborough website and click on the online catalog. It'll take you right there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Very exciting.
Website. You can go to the next slide. And we have an app too, which is really cool. So if you ever forget your library card, you can now if you've got the app downloaded on your smartphone, you can just open the Aspen app and there's a copy of your library card that we can scan and you can check out books right from there. So it's really cool. It does everything that the website does, but it's just the convenience of being on your phone. So it's called
Only on smartphones.
only on smartphones, yeah. So it's called Aspen Lita. If you have questions about that, I can help get you set up with it, but it's very cool. Cool place to just have everything all in one place, super convenient.
Wow.
It's all one word, Estelita.
So you go to your app store.
I found it.
Yeah, and it's Aspen Lita. I think it's 2 words. And then, you just log in with your library name and your card number and it takes you right to our catalog. So you get everything that you get online just with the convenience of being on your phone. So exciting new things that we've been busy working on this year. Cool. All right, next. Cool. All right, I'm going to hand this over to Tim now.
Perfect. All right, so I figured I would start with just in general the top searches for 2024. For movies, we had Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine were the most searched movies. It makes sense that in the US, the #1 search for topic was the US election, followed by excessive heat. Food, I found this one kind of fun. Olympic chocolate muffins were apparently incredibly popular, and I'm not going to try and pronounce the second one. As for people, again, no surprise, we had Donald Trump, and we also had Catherine, Princess of Wales. And you can find all this information if you go to Google Trends. It will allow you to kind of contextualize a lot of information based on a time frame, which can be fun to play around with. One of the news articles that was kind of important for this year. Has anyone heard of CRISPR?
Oh, yeah.
CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. Rolls off the tongue. It's basically a gene editing thing that allows scientists to modify the DNA of something, which for the past decade or so, people have been saying that this is going to change the world. But this year was the first time when a medicine was developed using CRISPR, and it has been approved for the treatment of sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction for making incredibly targeted medication available. Does anyone remember the obesity drugs got super popular? Everyone was talking about them, like Ozempic, stuff like that. Well, as with all new medication, they found a slight side effect. Basically, people losing weight faster than normal has had an adverse impact on their muscle mass. And now there is a new wave of drugs coming that they are trying to get approved for people who have lost a lot of weight but want to retain the amount of muscle they have, which tons of fun. A little on the technical side, there were a lot of cloud outages this year. You probably have seen reference to them in news articles. The big ones this year were AT&T, Microsoft, Cloudflare, and Salesforce. Each time one of these companies loses access to the cloud or you lose access to their cloud, for businesses especially, it's a significant cost. The AT&T outage, I think, lasted about 10 days, and it was for an entire section of the United States. So causes a lot of issues. The more and more we rely on all of these cloud platforms, basically the more out of our hands a lot of this control is. So whenever a cloud outage happens, you can't really do anything about it. Like, for example, if in your house a pipe springs a leak, you can physically do something to fix it. With cloud outages, there really isn't anything you can do, which has been slightly frustrating for people in the technical side of this. And the more and more we rely on these technologies, the more and more susceptible we are to potentially foreign actors, causing these cloud outages as opposed to just occasional negligence, like has been the case so far.
Is that one question?
Yep.
As a former programmer and systems designer, I'm worried that a lot of these applications are designed by computers and humans aren't interested, which makes debugging very difficult. Could you mention something about debugging, Tim? How they do debugging now?
Yeah, so debugging now oftentimes is a somewhat automated process, where you will put the code into a debugger and it will just make sure that everything kind of talks to itself well. What the automated debugging tools aren't great at is actually real world scenarios of usage. So it will say that this section of code works perfectly, but it doesn't have the context of what that section of code needs to do to interact with everything else. And as a lot of these systems kind of get integrated together, it's getting kind of crazy with the amount of stuff that needs to work with each other. For example, later on, we'll talk about the cloud, or not, we'll talk about the, this escaped me. We'll talk about it later on. But there was an instance of basically people testing code on the wrong version of a product and then pushing it out because it worked great, but they pushed out the code that worked great for an older product, not the new one, and it broke a lot of stuff. So it's just, as you know, it's more efficient, it's faster to have machines automate a lot of these tasks, but they're not able to reliably check as much as is needed in some cases. Also with, I mean, you probably have experienced this, but whenever I was doing coding in college, a lot of what we were taught was in higher level languages. So basically the languages that are more readable for humans. And those languages are generally converted automatically into kind of the more system level languages. And that has also gotten a little bit more complicated as those higher level languages continue to evolve and people lose the ability to understand the more machine level, like assembly languages.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Broadcom. Broadcom's a big company. It bought a big company. Now big companies are looking to leave the big company, is essentially the takeaway. So Broadcom bought VMware. You may not know what VMware is, but it was basically the absolute largest, the pinnacle, top of the top provider of virtualizing servers, which is what a lot of our current infrastructure runs on, is a virtualized server. So Broadcom is a massive company. They bought it, and then they started making changes to it without really taking the time to think if companies would like the changes they're making. And then companies started to jump ship. So tons of layoffs, lots of product portfolio reductions, price increases, lots of negative stuff. Ultimately, it shouldn't impact people too much, but for people who work with virtualized virtualized infrastructure, it was a pretty massive change in 2024. So let's talk about my job security. It's looked better, right? So during the pandemic, IT jobs were great, super solid. Everyone was hiring like crazy. Starting in 2022 and 2023, they started to lay off a lot of IT workers, and that has not changed in 2024. And one of the main reasons is people were going crazy trying to hire everyone they could, right during and after the pandemic. So they overhired, and basically every company has started downsizing. You'll see lots of news articles about this. Some notable companies were Google, Salesforce, Cisco, SAP, Veeam, Orca, Meta. Facebook had a massive round a couple months ago, but a lot of technical jobs are kind of getting downsized, and also the impact of AI on the industry has kind of reduced the number of people you necessarily need to fill a role. So yes, I am acutely aware of the impact AI is having on jobs in America. Cyber, yep.
Tim, this is Cap, but with the problems within the system, why are they letting people go and depending on less functional sources?
Oh, well, it kind of depends what system people are talking about. So let's just say a company has a cybersecurity department, and let's say it's 3 people. They used to need to have 3 people because you'd have to look at all the logs, you'd have to look at all the policies, you'd have to just manually check a lot of these things. The people could set up automations, but it was still somewhat of a manual process where humans had to look at the output. What has happened is a lot of companies have started providing software that theoretically does what a person would do in their job, using AI to try and figure out if something is a threat or not a threat. So the process begins, do we want to pay a security professional, let's just say $50,000 to $150,000 a year to do this? Or do we want to pay this software company $50,000 a year for their AI? So that team of 3 would then be downsized to a team of 2, because theoretically the AI is doing the work of a full person, but still needs to be managed. But the other 2 team members will then take over kind of looking after the software and making sure that it's working correctly.
So they inherit more work on their roles, taking part of the third person's job into the first 2 people's.
Basically, yeah. Yep.
Mark?
Standard
So
procedure.
I wanted to ask why Microsoft wasn't listed on the affected companies.
Oh,
They haven't laid off.
I think they didn't have as massive layoffs. I think they did more of like restructuring, where they would move people from team to team. Like for example, with Google, they recently announced that they are suspending development on their next generation of tablet. And that company, Google, would have 2 options, right? They would basically take the couple hundred people assigned to work on developing that new tablet, and they could either say, all right, cool, we're no longer having this program, you guys are fired. Or they'll say, we're no longer developing this program, you're going to be transitioned to a new team. There were definitely layoffs at Microsoft, but I think there's probably less monumental layoffs than a place like Google, Salesforce, Cisco. But
I think
they definitely laid them off.
IBM Tim, do you know anything about?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, IBM's CEO got ousted.
Right,
They're they did have layoffs, but I don't think it was that crazy comparatively, like compared to the ones listed. But there are definitely those that weren't listed on this list.
the word you used was theoretical, and I think that's an important word.
Just another little piece, Tim. You probably know this, but what Amazon is doing, we have a couple of family members who work for Amazon around the country. They're just basically asking people to return to the office. And so people are self-selecting to leave.
Yep.
Thus, they get to reduce their workforce. So, and they stay out of press in terms of having to do big layoffs. They're just saying, get back to the office. People don't like it. They don't want to go
Yeah.
back.
And a huge number of these companies are doing that. It helps with their costs. And then when, during the pandemic, when office space was kind of non-existent and they had these hiring sprees, they weren't hiring people for in-office work. So when they, have started transitioning as of last year back to in-office work, they're kind of like, you either have to now move your entire existence because you took this 100% fully remote job, or you need to leave. It's unfortunate.
But some of it is people aren't doing their job. And I talked to somebody the other day and I said, you're always on the phone. He says, I get paid. And it wasn't for doing his job. It was just on the phone.
Yep.
Hard to monitor.
Yeah, when you're home, yeah, hard to monitor you.
Hard to know. So I mean, it's
Um,
basically computers, automation is cheaper than people.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where a lot of, not a lot of, some IT tasks can kind of be automated, and you still need someone there to make sure that the output is working, that the input is properly set. But ultimately, there could be positions where you basically need to sit in front of a computer all day, but you clicked start at the beginning of your day, and you're just making sure nothing goes wrong. And companies have tried to figure out ways to determine if someone is working versus not working. It was a big bank, I think it was JP Morgan Chase, that had a huge round of layoffs whenever they did like an internal investigation and tried to figure out if people were using mouse jigglers specifically, because they're software that you would use to connect your computer back to the office basically would just register if you were doing an input on the computer, and that's how it determined if you were there. And people would buy these devices that would basically just move their mouse a little bit to show it's active. If anyone remembers in The Simpsons when Homer takes one of those birds that like dips its beak in water forever and like puts that on the space bar, that's essentially what some people were doing. Not that I do that.
Of course you don't, Tim.
You're
Tim, how about a
incognito on the other
production?
side of town.
Tim,
Jobs.
do you have a prediction about how the war between automation and human labor is going to go?
I think I'll have to deal with it in about a decade. I mean, for the most part, we already have most of our like massive industrial factory settings. People are monitoring the big machine doing the work, but people aren't physically doing a lot of that stuff anymore. They're working with the big machine that's able to do it. I think we'll just get more towards the machine doing even more itself. So you'll still need people there, but it'll be an incredibly interesting time how this develops.
Specifically, Tim, my question is, everyone knows that human labor is more expensive than automated. So my question really is, when are companies going to decide that, like Boeing decided it's more important to spend money on safety and our reputation than it is on the bottom line, saving money. So it's probably impossible to predict. So I'm asking you a question that's hard to answer.
Yeah, I think it's all about kind of reliability and short-term goals for a lot of companies when shareholders are involved. So if a business is making, like Boeing, is making money on a current line of planes, I don't think they're going to uproot that and change how they're doing that line of planes. So for the next decade, 2 decades, the production of that specific, line of planes isn't going to change. Because people in upper management aren't going to want to take the hit of changing to a new process and potentially having failure. I think what's going to happen is the new versions of stuff that's coming down the pipe. That's when these more automated machine processes are going to be kind of put forward from the ground up as opposed to replacing something that's already existing.
Tim, in Pennsylvania, at Harley Davidson, the most interesting parts that I saw happening, big machines were doing it in enclosed small spaces. And 4 people were in like a merry-go-round, just screwing in a nut or a bolt or a tail light. Very boring jobs handed down to real people.
That the computers missed? Is that what you're saying?
No, the computer was doing fancier, like making fenders and doing interesting things, and the people were just doing nuts and bolts and putting on a tail light lens or something, and it was just like, really?
The articulation allowed by the human hand is still not very well matched by machines,
Right.
but they're trying to solve it.
Yeah.
Well, the computers probably don't want, or this AI stuff, they don't want to do the dull little stuff that the little human peons can do.
I mean, there's also the question of how strong are the unions in those industries. Do you guys remember what happened with the tellers at toll booths, where the toll booth union basically said, we don't want to go towards these automated machines, and then like 3 years later
Toll was closed.
they just got rid of like almost all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a bit, but we'll see how far, quote unquote, progress advances.
Like air traffic controllers?
Yeah, that's a scary one.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, I think it's all about, a big CYA, where no one kind of wants to be the first to do something that might jeopardize safety in a very public way. So air traffic controllers probably will end up using AI to help them, quote unquote, but I don't think, replacing is in the cards at this moment.
We hope.
Or we could just be going towards Minority Report, All right. Cyber attacks. It's also not getting better. Yep. Ransomware is still incredibly popular. One of the big issues is we kind of talked about it earlier with a lot of the cloud infrastructure. It's now a lot easier to do cyber attacks at a specific company, and then impact a lot more companies. So you don't actually have to gain physical access to a company anymore to have a massive impact on their operations. We had some massive cyber attacks this year. United Health, Ascension, CDK Global, Microsoft, AT&T. People have started getting things in the mail basically saying your data has been found in a breach. I don't know if you guys have received those letters. In case you're wondering what to do whenever you receive one of those letters, basically make sure that your bank statements look correct, and then go ahead and change your password on every impacted breach target. So if you get a letter saying your data was found and there was a breach of Home Depot, change Home Depot's password. A password manager, subtle plug, but a password manager helps with this process. It will automatically check to see if your passwords have been found in a breach, and will recommend you change it. So you kind of don't have to think about it too much. You just see a red icon that says, change your password, please. And then you go ahead and do that. But cyber attacks are not going away. Any questions?
Tim, I didn't have it on the computer, but I got 8 letters questioning medical bills for me of United Health, and they're not my supplemental health insurance.
Yep.
Tim, my question is, what is the best password manager? Because I use Google.
Yeah.
You
So
understand how it works?
Google's password manager and Apple's keychain, I would put in like a password manager halfway point. They're good if you're
I
using
use
them.
both,
Good.
actually. I use Apple and I use Google, so I'm confused.
Yeah, so Apple has Apple Keychain. They've
Yeah.
recently come out with Apple Passwords, which is a little more secure. In general, I prefer people using a more dedicated password manager. The 2 ones I generally tell people to look at are Bitwarden and Proton Pass. Those are also the 2 that I personally use. Yep.
Why do you use 2, though?
Because I don't want my work passwords integrating with my personal passwords.
Ah. Okay, so separating work and.
Yep. Emotionally, I find it easier for me to have just completely separate applications, completely separate devices. I don't want to be doing work on my personal computer, and I don't want to be doing personal stuff on my work computer. So I just completely separate as much as I can. The reason why I generally recommend Bitwarden and Proton Pass aren't because they are the absolute best, even though I think they're definitely up there, but it's because they have the best free versions, which allows you to look at one or both of them and figure out if you like it, and then you can pay for it if you want the additional features. But both of them, if you didn't pay a single cent to them, you're still getting a very solid product.
Thank you, Tim. You answered my question I was about to ask.
Yep.
Do you have to pay for them?
In general, right? Just in general, the free version of Bitwarden and Proton Pass, if you are a personal user and you only want yourself to have access to them, the free version is fantastic. Whenever you want to have a plan or use a password manager as a family, so 2 or more people, that's when the paid features really get useful. For example, you may share an Amazon account. You may share a Netflix password. You may share a food delivery service. You both need to sign into it to figure out what you're getting. The paid versions allow you to share individual like buckets of passwords among two people where both people can interact with it. And all of it being secure. But we definitely do a full class on password managers, and you can always look at the slideshow. You can ask Rebecca for the slideshow or the video of the last one we did, or you can just, next time you get that email from Rebecca saying we have classes coming up, just check to see if the password manager one's available.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep. CrowdStrike. This is the word I was forgetting earlier, if you remember me stumbling over myself for a bit. CrowdStrike, it was definitely in the news. Even if you don't remember it, you definitely heard about it. This is the one where all of the airplanes were grounded for like 2 days. It was a global IT outage. It basically locked up business computers around the world. And the biggest impact were for airlines and healthcare, just because those were incredibly noticeable. And just all the computers that were supporting these businesses' systems, they just got turned off and no one could access them. And you could physically, if you could physically touch it, you could fix it. But a lot of IT is in remote locations now or not directly on site. So it took hours or days for people to physically get to all of the impacted machines. And it all happened without anyone really pressing a button. Like if I was working for Delta as an IT person, I didn't do anything that morning and I woke up to a crap storm. This is going on a little bit long, so I'll skip the how it happened. But at the end, if people want to stick around and ask how it happened, I can explain that as well. TikTok, in the ongoing theme of me having TikTok as a slide for all of these year-end things, I would like to reiterate that TikTok is still not secure and it still gathers your data. All right, this last one. This is a somewhat recent news article. The FBI, you may have seen the news articles about the FBI giving recommendations or news articles about China hacked US telecom networks. That's what this slide is going over. It was the Salt Typhoon attack. And everyone believes, wink, wink, that it was orchestrated by China. But China says they didn't do it. Hence, wink, wink. And the FBI and CISA basically put out a pretty important statement saying that US officials are urging citizens to adopt encrypted messaging apps. So what does this mean for you? If you have an iPhone and you are using iMessage to talk to another person with an iPhone, you're already fine. If you are using an Android phone and you are using RCS messaging, which is enabled in Messages, to talk to another Android phone with RCS enabled in Messages, then you are fine. If you notice, the Android one's a little more complicated to say. Apple. But the big thing is if you have a family member who has an Android device and you have an iPhone and you are using chat to text to each other, that is the data that was compromised. And that is the data that currently cannot be secured.
Can't be secured?
Sorry, what was that?
Can't be secured?
Correct. Cannot be currently secured.
I have a question. I just send texts to people. I don't send, I think they're messages, but what is the difference between sending a text and sending a message?
All right, so text is a general term for a couple of different things. It's kind of like what happened with Velcro or Kleenex, where, no one says, could I have a nose tissue, please? People are like, give me Kleenex. That's what happened to the word text. So text in this context refers to a SMS or an MMS message, and those are 100% not able to be secured. What has changed in the evolution of the phrase text is if you text somebody on your iPhone, quote unquote, you're using iMessage, which isn't like a traditional text at all. Goes over the internet, it's fully encrypted, goes to the other person's device, gets decrypted, blah, 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 everyone's happy. So it's kind of just word usage, word change as to what a text is.
So when I send a text to my daughters who have Apple phones, and I send it from my Apple, they're using the iMessage.
Correct.
So we're okay.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you, Tim.
But my Android to my son-in-law with a, let's see, he's got the iPhone, fancy one. Yeah, so then that one can be.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
I have an Android and he has the fancy
He's got the iPhone.
iPhone. So
Correct.
that's,
No, can't be secured.
So does that just mean that like, be careful what you send, or?
I mean, that means China knows what you sent. Essentially, from this, what recently happened, it's basically, I'm not going to say anyone who wants to see them can see them, but it's just something that can't really be secured at this moment. The next slide goes over the solution, which was recommended, which is essentially move to an encrypted messaging platform. But the encrypted messaging platform has a problem, and that's usage, right? This whole issue is because if an iPhone uses iMessage to send a message to an Android phone, the Android phone is not using iMessage. The solution that encrypted communication services offer is you just have to have the same app on both ends in order for it to work. It sounds really simple in practice, but you try getting a group of 100 people to all agree to use the exact same app, and you'll realize that it's kind of crazy. It's kind of daunting. So to solve this, you would basically need to get everyone to use the same app. If everyone's using Apple devices, that's fairly easy. Everyone's already using the same app. But I just listed 4 options out. These are the ones you'll generally see in news articles. The first one is Signal. That's probably the current go-to. Number 2 is WhatsApp. The only reason why WhatsApp I wouldn't rank it higher than Signal is just because Meta owns it. If you're not familiar, Meta changed their name from Facebook, and I'm not really the trusting type when it comes to Facebook and having access to what I'm doing. The next one is Telegram. The reason why that one is kind of scary is it's somewhat not open source. So it has a secret sauce and it says, please trust us. It also has the backing of a former high-end Russian person, where he did it for the right reasons. He allegedly created this because he wanted dissidents in Russia to be able to message each other, noble causes. But it's kind of scary having kind of a company that's consolidated around one person. And then the fourth option is Threema. The reason why Threema is pretty low on the list is not because it's bad. It's absolutely fantastic. But it requires, I think, a $7 payment to use it. One-time fee, but all of these other ones have you're able to use for free. which makes switching to them a little bit easier. But again, you'd have to get literally everyone to switch to it, who you want to talk to, which is the difficulty.
There's no way of knowing what other people have for phones when you send them messages.
If you send them a message, it's just sending it to whatever their default messaging service is. In general, that'll be iMessage or Samsung Messages or Google Messages. But
Oh.
the confusing thing is if you start using one of these, you can only send to a user that's on the platform if you want it to be secure. So like if I have
Ask everybody then.
Oh, we've got a question.
Yeah.
Already use Signal and WhatsApp with European connections. That's how most of them do. We're doing WhatsApp and then change to Signal. So when I send messages to them, that's what we use, but here, that's not common practice. So-
Yeah, Europe is very
Yeah.
big on
Like-
these.
Yeah, they're very big on them and secure messaging, yeah.
Yep, specifically in Germany, and for businesses, Threema is very popular. But apart from that, WhatsApp and Signal, I think, are pretty well entrenched as the biggest two.
But I mean, I have a lot of people in contacts that I have no idea what they have for phones, so
A lot of us do, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't it true that if you send a message on an Apple phone, it goes out in blue? And if the recipient is not Apple, it goes out in green.
correct.
That's one way you can tell. Mhm.
Yep, specifically for Apple, blue messages are good, green is bad.
Oh.
All right. That's all I had to talk about, but any questions, comments, or concerns? I mean, I'm free and I'm sure Rebecca wouldn't run away too quickly.
Any questions before I do the last slide?
Thank you, Tim.
Cool. All right, yeah. Oh, and Tim, you changed my my slide because it said, thank you, Tim. He changed it. So yeah, thank you, Tim. Tech Tuesday class resumed in June after a break through the first half of the year. We've had over 200 people take advantage of our Tech Tuesday classes and our Wednesday tech drop-in. So if you don't know, Tim is here on Wednesdays. in the
Not
afternoon.
this Wednesday.